So on the show today, Kimi Inch, also known as Mistress Nina Payne, trainer of Dominatrix, Kink professional, somatic, educator and healer, many things going on, lectured at Princetown University, been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Cosmo, New York Post, blah, blah, blah. Comes highly recommended. Kimi, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much, Mark.
So this is one of a sort of series of interviews I'm doing, exploring the world of kink and what it might mean to embodiment practitioners. But we always start with people's personal stories. So what's your journey with the body, Kimi?
Well, I started working as a dominatrix when I lived in Tokyo. I was DJing there, and I was DJing at these fetish parties. And before then, I had sort of, dabbled a little bit with some kinky play, but I had no idea that that's what I was doing. I was in my early 20s and I'd have boyfriends and I'd say, hey, why don't we tie each other up? Not really realizing that that was, kinky at all. So when I was formally introduced to the kink scene and started to learn more about it in depth, I started working as a dominatrix. And initially, being in my early 20s, I was just like, cool, I get to make a bunch of money. I get to be spoiled and treated like a queen, on this surface level. There was this idea that I could be the boss and be in control. And that felt really safe for me at the time, this idea that I get to be in control and I get to call the shots. So it wasn't until I started to do my own deep personal work in somatic therapy and core energetics that I really started to see the sacredness of kink, and I started to see it below the surface level. And what I had experienced because of that healing, that personal healing, was that, wow, this work is actually really sacred. There's a sense of deep connection. There's real attunement here. And it's the possibility for people to really surrender and let go into themselves and to be seen in a way that nobody sees them. Like my clients were being seen in a way that their families don't know. A lot of their times the partners don't know, right? And even more so, their own therapists don't know that this is part of their identity.
So something comes out that isn't coming out even in their sort of intimate or personal relationships. Okay, tell us about your somatics background then. Let's hear a little bit about the sort of somatics training you've had, and then we're definitely coming back to the dominatrix thing.
Okay, so I was introduced to a somatic therapeutic modality called core energetics about 10 years ago. And I had seen talk therapists before. I had struggled around with things around depression and stuff like that hadn't really felt any alleviation from traditional therapy alone. So when I went to core energetic practitioner and started to incorporate things like my body and my breath, I was given permission to yell, scream, kick, hit things. That was like a eye-opening experience for me. I was able to move a lot of sort of pent-up energy. And when that flow started to happen within my body, I was able to release a lot of emotion that wasn't given permission to let go of. And of course, that was going to just affect all aspects of my life, like how I was in relationship, how I was in work, how I showed up in the world. You know what I mean? So given that introduction and finding real experiences of self-love and peace through somatic healing, I took it upon myself to wanting to learn more and wanting to bring it to the world myself. So yeah, that's when I started to study it, train at Core Energetics about 6 years ago.
Who's the founder of Core Energetics? Remind me. It's ringing a bell.
Sure, John Parakis is his name. He worked.
I've got it, but yeah, kind of a Greek-looking name. Yeah. Okay, right. Great. And trauma modalities, is that something you've got an interest in?
Yeah, my focus has been more around sexual trauma, sexual shame, sexual abuse, anything that's interrupted the natural energetic flow, which, I think a lot of people, if you sort of source back through their trauma, the sexuality piece is such a huge component of that. That's such a huge part of our core. And I think that it sort of ripples out into all other aspects of trauma. And we're relational creatures. So the way we experience life as we were developing as children is going to affect the way we approach sex as well. So
let me take a step back then, Kimi, if I may. Like, if someone, like devil's advocate, I almost want to say saint's advocate. If someone said to you, why is sex important? Like, surely it's fun. We need it as a species. And, it's a bit of light relief on a Friday night kind of thing. So it's a nice, fun thing to relax with. But it's not that important, is it? Surely. How would you respond to that?
Right. Well, I think that's a common perception of sex. Absolutely. So I do get that a lot. And I have to say that when we start tapping into the sexual energy piece, I just say the word sex and that creates a sensation in people's bodies, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's deeply connected to such a vulnerable place in ourselves. You can be talking to a Fortune 500 company owner or to a garbage man. It doesn't matter. It's going to sort of impact them in one way or the other. So why the big emphasis on sex? Why is there all this repression? Why is there all this dysfunction connected to it? And when you start digging deeper into someone's past, you start seeing that the first messages around their bodies as children was very sort of controlled in a way, not only by their parents, but by society as a large. And you start to peel back these layers and you start to see like our very first introduction to our bodies as sexual beings was probably not always held in the most, positive way. And how that can like impact somebody's soul development in a sense.
Right. It's kind of formative experiences, a child, someone, is touching themselves or enjoying their body in one way or another. And it's like, stop it. That's wrong, That's
wrong. Yeah. You're going to grow hair on your knuckles. I mean, think about all those different, wives' tales that are told.
I don't know that one. Hair on your knuckles? Is this an American one?
Oh, yeah.
No, we say you're going to go blind if you masturbate. We have that one.
That's a good one. Yep.
But hair on your knuckles, that's what, if you grow hair on your knuckles if you masturbate?
Yeah, that's right.
Sounds so bad. There's worse things than hairy knuckles. Okay.
Well, everyone will see your hairy knuckles and know that you're a wanker, right?
There we go. I mean, I'd be more worried about anyone who wasn't. But, okay. So you describe yourself as kinky or interested in kink, is that right?
I am, and I'm also a kink-friendly therapist as well.
Kink, so. What does that mean? So I guess we should, again, we've had a couple of kinky people on. I would... my friend Melissa's been on a couple of times. We should point people to her in a couple of other episodes we've done now. We had a Dutch guest on. What is kink and what does kink sex-friendly therapy mean? But let's just start with the kink and then we'll add the therapy. So what is kink to you, Kimi?
Yeah, so just put it in layman's terms, kink is the alternative of sex. So any sort of sexual practices considered unconventional. So things like the missionary position, having sex with one partner in your bed, with the lights off on a Tuesday night, yawn, is considered vanilla. No, listen, I like to poke fun, but I think, vanilla sex is a great...
There's a time and a place for vanilla sex, isn't there? Just there's a time and there's a place for white bread and vanilla ice cream. There's a time and a place for it.
The whole spectrum of it. Yes, absolutely. But the idea of kinky sex would be, a bit more unconventional. Of course, that's different for each person, right? What's considered unconventional.
Cultural as well, right? Like in some places, like anal sex is considered completely normal. Other times, places it's considered disgusting. And I've seen changes in my lifetime. I'm not that old, Kimi. I'm only 40, but I remember a time when sort of oral sex was considered a slightly unusual, risque thing French people did. And now it would be regarded as bad manners not to at least offer it, Yeah. So it's I've seen, changes in my own lifetime in terms of what is considered normal and definitely an opening up of that, definitely an opening up of what is considered okay. And we were talking to my last guest on about this subject about how even the last few years since that god-awful book, and then there was a gap, and then
50 Shades of Shit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no one rates it. You don't have to. We won't associate you with that terrible book, the awful consent culture and all the rest of it. But it seems like the last 2 or 3 years there's been a real renaissance of kink. If that's not too pretentious a term, the renaissance of kink. What's happened? Is it just the internet? What's happened that you're out of the closet? And is that going to take the fun away, Kimi? Is that going to take the fun away now that kink's no longer kinky?
I hear you. And, people ask that. And I think that it's just good to sort of have permission to explore these sort of fantasies. Whereas before, there's so much shame connected to having, you know, this fantasy of getting spanked or tied up. You know, there's so much shame connected to it that how can you really be fully in your heart and fully in your body when you're in so much shame? You're in so much secrecy. You know, there's been with sex, there's such an emphasis on the genitals, and that's great. You know, there can be a lot of pleasure that can be found there.
Yeah.
But when you start looking at things like kink doesn't only incorporate, you know, interaction at the genitals. That kink is a sort of practice with the mind, the imagination.
Right. The psychology is involved, right? Like in a big way. And you know, you often hear people say, oh, the brain is the biggest sexual organ or whatever, but there must be some truth in that. I think we've all had experiences of going, why am I so turned on? Not physically, not much is being done to me, but the situation or the person or the taboo of it or whatever it is a huge turn on.
Absolutely, Mark. I mean, anyone can tie someone else up. Anyone can spank another person. But the idea of getting into someone's head, right? Like really sort of occupying space there in this sacred place and being able to get under their skin and hopefully penetrate more than their bodies, but their souls. I mean, that's when you really sort of dive deep with someone. It could be a transcendent experience for some. And I don't know if you've heard of the term subspace and dom space, but people actually have.
But feel free to put those out. We have listeners who go from, you know, we have people listening to this in Berlin who are of a gender I've never heard of and do things in bed I've never heard of. And equally, we have people in the Midwest who really aren't that. So do feel free to explain, you know, subspace or dom space or things like that.
Yeah, well, you know, reasons I like sex is not just because it's rubbing genitals against genitals, and the reason I like kink is not just because it has really sexy outfits. I like these sort of things because it can actually alter your state of consciousness, just like any sort of drug can, just like meditation can, just like all of these different things. So when you think about that potentiality of being able to alter your consciousness, your state of mind through connection with another, through incorporating your body, your breath, you know, all parts, the head, the heart, the pelvis, all of these sort of things. It's a powerful experience, and you can really learn a lot about yourself in that experience.
Okay, saying a few things, I'm going to jump in. I hope you don't mind, like Irish interruption style. So, one thing I want to ask is why taboo is so interesting, but you've also just stated, like, I don't think most people out there understand the levels of psychological change that can happen through sex and kink, which are, you know, I've had blinding white light so I couldn't see for an hour, and transcendent spiritual experiences during sex, experiences that were at least as strong as high levels of hallucinogenic drugs during sex. And I'm not sure people necessarily get how they may be shifting from stressed to not stressed, or from not stressed to mildly amused, like but they're in this spectrum, and I know for a fact there's at least this much, and you're a pro, so it's probably really this much. Like, can you kind of like maybe say what some of those consciousness embodied shifts are really like for people that maybe haven't necessarily stumbled into them yet?
Well, you know, Mark, it's really hard for someone to reach this level that you're referring to when they're totally disconnected, truly disconnected from their bodies in general, right? Like, we live so much in our heads most of the time. Like, that's sort of where we are go-to, and that's how we operate. And the idea of sort of not just bringing that part into sex and your genitals, but bringing the whole self in, that takes intention. Like, really, you know, like anything with intention can be made more than it is. Like, I could drink wine and have an intention of having it be more than just getting drunk, right? I can have an intention that sex is going to be more than just climax, right?
Yeah, like, set and setting, they call it in hallucinogenic kind of work. The intentionality and the context that's in, and the whole container of it is as important as the drug you're taking, which would be the equivalent of the friction or whipping or whatever, right? Yeah. So that whole container's part of it, I'm sure, yeah.
But there, I think within that also is this need to surrender, and a lot of people need that control. Like, we hold on to it for dear life because that's where we feel safest.
Right.
And we struggle with trust. We struggle with trust not only to others, but ourselves and the universe as a whole, right? So if you're having a mistrustful experience of life, it's hard to let go in your most vulnerable state during sex. So people are just going to focus on the climax aspect. You know, you're not a good lover unless you get your girlfriend to come, right? Like, you're not a good lover if you don't have a big penis, or, you know, your sex is worthless unless you have an orgasm at the end of it. You know, how limiting are
Mm.
these perspectives. And the thing I like about kink is I tell people kink is not sex. Like it's not. And a lot of people think it is, but it's a tool. And you can use that tool sexually or non-sexually. But again, it goes back to the imagination, the creativity, tapping into different aspects of yourself. And I think kink has become more popular because people are starting to realize that, oh, like spicing things up, as some people like to call it, can incorporate more than just, you know, rubbing genital against genital. It can incorporate the mind. And why not go deeper with that and see how you can sort of open yourself up to even more?
Why do we love taboo so much? Because this seems to be, and as this becomes more popular, just to return to a point kind of we didn't quite go into before, taboo could lose, kink could lose some of its attraction as it loses some of its taboo, right? I mean, if you know, we had a guest on and she said, well, you know, my mum's got a strap on, you know, it's kind of like it's become so normal. And we want what's taboo. If you look, and porn seems to be getting more and more taboo, that this seems to be a sort of trend. Maybe you could talk about that, because I'm not sure how healthy a lot of that is. There seems to be a movement towards the extreme and towards the more and more taboo, you know, as spanking someone now seems almost vanilla, right? Where it's now it's like, right, they're going to be dressed as your sister, and the spanking's going to be with a bat, and it's going to be you're going to be dressed as a unicorn, they're going to be dressed as a dolphin, and there's going to be a priest watching. You know, like it gets like more and more extreme, more and more taboo. So, like, speak to that a little bit.
Absolutely, you know, and as you know, that the part of the thrill is the taboo nature. And why is that? So being taboo, being naughty, this idea, I'm doing something I'm not supposed to, you know, that creates, like releases chemicals in the brain. You're going to get a rush of adrenaline. You're going to have endorphins released. You can maybe even increase your production of oxytocin when you're engaging in these really high intensity moments where you sort of value to be outside of your norm. And you're talking about porn, and I'm so glad you are, because it is getting more and more extreme. But you have to remember, we've been exposed to so much visually as far as sex and kink and stuff goes. But for an individual to actually go in and engage with somebody in a way where they're gonna maybe push the envelope, what they may not realize is that you might have the what blow up tub full of lube, and there might be midges. I don't know what the fuck, like who knows how wild it can get. But for someone to really stand naked in their vulnerability and really be exposed in that way, that's something that we still have trouble doing. And
right. If you've got people having double penetration without any kind of intimacy, without any kind of actual connection or being seen, like the kind of the really risky stuff's being missed in that.
So I'm not surprised that, visual, like the things are getting more edgier and things are getting more extreme, but it is taking us away from our own vulnerabilities. Because for somebody, I've had sessions where, there's no nudity, there is just a lot of talking. And so many times people have these go-to fantasies that they don't talk about. And those fantasies don't always include sex, nudity, or kinky activities at all. Like I have a client, she comes to see me because her biggest fantasy she's had for years is to have an older woman shave her head. And that's the whole fantasy.
Okay, that's it. Well, so if I enjoy my colleague Daniela shouting at me in German, it doesn't turn me on, but on one level I quite enjoy it. Is that kink, or is that just me being weird? Like
hashtag just being weird. No, I mean, it's not for me to say, Mark. I would definitely want to get more information than just what you're saying, because things are sort of tantalizing in different ways. It's titillizing, right? And that titillation is great and fun, but it's surface. It's a little bit surface there, right? Like how do we dive below the surface? How do we get to a place of
I recommend being shouted at by in German for everyone, by the way, at some point. Maybe I watched too many war films when I was a kid and it's left a deep imprint. So when is kink not healthy?
Right. So especially around when we think about kink as this idea of violence or abuse, kink is not healthy when there isn't clear consent, when there isn't clear consciousness around it, right? So these partners come together to play. The whole aspect of that is building the foundation. There has to be a lot of communication that happens before you can start engaging in play, if it's true kink. And whoever's in the dominant position has a responsibility to their partner in a sense. So there's such a huge problem with abuse of power in this world right now, right? You know, I'm in the States, and the abuse of power is a huge thing. So this is what I'm talking about, how sexuality can be so related to bigger aspects of our lives and what's happening in the world. So when you're engaging in kinky activities with a partner, there's a clear communication, there's consent, and there's always an ability to communicate even while the scene is in progress. And the person who's on the dominant end isn't the one who's the taker. He's actually, or he or she is the one who's actually the giver in the dynamic. They're there to support the submissive or the bottom to having the experience that they're seeking in a way that's not only effective but safe as well, and that is respectful in a sense.
Yeah, there's a very interesting sort of yin yang thing as to who's in charge and who's being served. And just, you said scene there, so unless people may have heard this in a previous episode, but as I understand it, a kink scene is the sort of boundaries of this is what happens, this is
right, like
the role,
a period of time. Yeah, it would be a period of time where people would engage with that intention to play. And so where it becomes unhealthy is when those sort of, you know, foundational parts are overlooked or just ran over altogether. And that happens a lot as submissive, you know, and a dom, but whether position you're in, you have to take care of yourself first. And the idea of being able to engage in these activities has to sort of be connected to self-respect and self-love as well.
Okay, so a couple of things. I'm going to slow you down a little bit. Are you in New York, by the way?
I'm actually in Texas right now. I came to Texas for the COVID. Yeah, I was here for a festival that got canceled, and I just ended up staying. So
I had a good time in Austin. So
cool. Yeah, cool city.
Great town. New York I like a lot too, actually. It's fast. You know, it's fast. So consent, we've talked about this on many episodes, big deal in embodiment world. The rest of the embodiment world's catching up with Kink. Kink was way ahead. I feel like you guys have led the way, and the rest of us are like going, oh, that sounds like a good idea. And then the other thing here is like some awareness around your patterns and what you're playing out, right? That is, yes, there can be consent, but it can still be unhealthy. There can be...
Right. So I deal with people with fetishes, you know, they have a sort of obsession or a compulsion towards one activity or one body part, etc. And where it becomes unhealthy is when it starts inhibiting your life somehow. You can't get any enjoyment whatsoever unless that part is present. And why that could be unhealthy is because it's very limiting. And I've worked with people that maybe had a specific fetish, let's say feet, for example, right? Who, once they were allowed to really go into that aspect of their kink and that desire, fully embodied, like in their hearts, in their genitals, in their heads, like just fully and wholly submerge themselves into that experience. After a few times, it loses its hold.
Okay, because they've expressed it fully. Because I kind of have anxiety. People tend to get kinky as they get older, I've noticed. And people's kinks tend to deepen, I've also noticed. And maybe get more extreme or maybe get more specific, both of those patterns I've seen. And I go, okay, so I'm relatively vanilla. I've got a few little things going on, you know, on air. I'm probably not going to go into all the details, but a few little things that are a bit, but most of them would be in the realms that the average lover would say, okay, I'll give that a try. You know, like, okay, I did that once before. I've never done that, but let's give it a go, you know?
Totally.
I don't have anything that's within the realms of like, okay, I need you to defecate on me while singing opera. You know, nothing so specific or extreme and I go, if that was the only way I could get off, that would limit my love life a lot. Right? And is that fair on partners? Do I have to go to special conventions to find someone? You know, like that specificity does feel like, okay, at that point, is that healthy?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a really important question because it's been my experience that kink allows for all of these sort of experiences. There's all these bells and whistles, right? Like we can hang you upside down. We can do this. We can do that. But I'll tell you something, Mark, like when you strip all of that shit away and you really get to the heart of it, people are looking either for surrender, to let go, to be seen, to be vulnerable, to feel their power. Like those are that's what's happening underneath all of this. Like I've had clients that have come in that are like, you know, I had this woman, she identified as a submissive and she never really felt like she was in healthy relationships. She felt like her male partners would take advantage of her and all of this stuff, but she just could not stop with her fantasies of being overpowered. And when we started to dive in deeper and started to play more and more, it was uncovered that it wasn't so much about she loved to be spanked and tied up. What she really actually craved more than anything is to feel the full presence of her partner in a way that her partner just had tunnel vision and only saw her and wanted to take care of her in some sense and wanted to give her all their attention, all their skill, all of their everything. And that's really what it was about. It really wasn't about all this sensation stuff, which is great because it heightens the experience. But really, when we peel things away, you'll find that it's not so much about the bells and whistles. It's about the relationship, and it's about that.
What's the relational dynamics? And this returns us to the theme I definitely wanted to return to, which is how can kink be therapeutic, right? We touched upon it earlier, but now we're kind of really getting into how. Like someone's out there, they're listening, they've got a bit, imagining most of the people listening to this have got a love life that involves, you know, maybe not on lockdown, but when they can, a little bit of kinkiness going on. Maybe they're not hardcore, they don't have all the kit, you know, the equipment, they don't have a dungeon in their basement, you know, but maybe they've got at least a little bit of that going on in their life. So how, and everyone who listens to this podcast is interested in learning and healing. Like, this is a podcast for learning and healing people. So how can they turn that practice they have or their sex life in a little bit more towards the learning and healing side of things?
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, I want to actually go back to, because you're saying, you know, the older I get, it feels like the kinkier you get. I love when you said that, Mark, because it was like, I felt like it's a combination between, you know, is it just a little bit of boredom and like, what's next? Or is it like, no fucks given? Like, I just, like, I'm not going to be as rigid with what I believe is right and isn't right. So, you know, I think it could be a combination for people as they get older that, you know, they want to know what's next and how they can sort of keep pushing themselves and making life interesting. And in a therapeutic structure, you know, when you're thinking about your kinks and your desires and looking to explore it, I think it's an opportunity to sort of dive deeper into your own psyche. The work that I'm doing with people, you know, related to sexual dysfunction, it could be erectile dysfunction, or it could be painful pelvic dysfunction for women. It can also be around sexual identity and you know, where they feel like they want to explore more of their feminine energy if they happen to be in a male identified body, etc. There's all of these different sort of avenues that can be taken, but the part that I think is important to keep in mind is this like sort of sacredness to sort of just show up and be with what is. So when I'm talking to my clients about kink and their fantasies, we're starting off really slow and going very, very slowly about what was their sort of background growing up, just like any therapy session. I'm getting their medical background, their family background, and then of course there's a huge emphasis on the sexual background. You know, people report about what their first memories of sex are. What was it like in their household? What were the messages they were getting around sex when they were little and growing up as kids? Did they feel like they could be safe in that aspect? Was it scary? Was it confusing? Was it considered wrong? All of these sort of things. And we start sort of building more and more towards looking at the big picture of what their sexual experience and journey has been and how it's sort of related to where they are now in the present. And is that sort of belief system that they developed during that childhood experience, is it serving them now? Do they feel that they're getting the fulfillment through sex and themselves that they long for? Because there's a lot of longing that these clients have. They have a lot of longing that they're not feeling that fulfillment and they don't understand why. So we're trying to get to the root of the problem, like what happened during your sexual journey to create the belief systems you have that may be keeping you from having the full life that you want to live.
Mm-hmm. And is your work primarily to improve people's sex lives or the rest of their lives or both?
Usually my client's objective is just to improve their sex life, but lo and behold, once we sort of heal aspects of their sexuality, they start to notice it starts to affect other ways that they're seeing how they're showing up in the world, or how they're showing, at the very least, how they're showing up in their relationships. You know, and that's kind of exciting. But yeah, mostly people do come to me with this sort of, you know, expectation or hope to sort of fix them, which is not what I do. I don't fix people. I help guide them to their own inner truth. And then through that experience, they start uncovering a lot of stuff. And then they start to see, oh, wow, this is interesting because this is kind of related to, you know, how I've been in relationship with people, or how I look at women, or how I look at men, etc. And it all kind of gets affected somehow.
Question I asked another guest, but I find this interesting, is Do you think our sex lives are mostly just an expression of our embodiment and how we are? Like, I'm fairly dominant in life, I'm fairly dominant in bed, right? Or do you think for many people, or just is it just a few people, it's compensatory or balancing, we could say, like, you know, the shy secretary who becomes a dominatrix when she puts her head out, you know, the librarian who, you know, does this. Like, it's kind of a cliche, but I've also seen that, you know.
Yeah.
I've probably seen more of the former, if I'm honest. What would you say in terms of this idea of, are we just expressing our embodiments in bed, or are we just you know, obviously not just literally just in bed, obviously that'd be very boring, but
Right.
you know what my Britishism means. So yeah, what's your sense of that? Are we mostly expressing? Are we mostly compensating? What's the relationship between life and our sex life?
I think it's a great question. You know, like I don't know if I have like a single answer for you because my experience has been, as you've just described, like, you know, people have shown up in different ways. Like, I do think embodiment is a big part of how you show up in your sexuality in your life. But I don't know if a lot of people have a lot of consciousness around that. And I'm curious, Mark, like being that, you know, you're a strong, powerful man that tends to like control in your life and in control in your sex life, you know, do you feel like you're opposed to surrender and release? Because I don't get that sense of you from you at all.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
Well, it has traditionally it's been difficult for me, but one thing I've noticed recently is that side of things has come out a little bit more as I've kind of gained more sort of power and status through the conference. And it's not why I do it, but it's just come with the package. And it's like there can be a night, you know, I manage 30, 40 people now. So there can be a nice thing in letting go. And I actually experience it more in a non-sexual sense when I get massaged. I like to just, because it used to be, I'd be very specific. I want this, massage my calves this way, my back this way. Now I'm just kind of like, oh, do to me whatever you want. And sometimes a really hard massage I like, because I can see the attraction of it. It brings me right to if I'm worrying about my latest Facebook marketing campaign or my staffing issues or, you know, whatever's going on for the company, a little bit of a painful massage will definitely take me out of that. And it doesn't give me an erection or anything. I don't feel turned on, but I can see the appeal of pain much more now in terms of it bringing you to the moment. But I go, okay, it's non-injurious. It feels a healthy. I'm not cutting myself or something, you know. And also I just surrender. I did have this experience of having a massage from this huge Russian guy, and he didn't speak English. He didn't understand that I was telling him it was too hard. And I had to kind of just completely surrender. And I was sort of blissed out for a couple, look at you smiling. I was blissed out for a couple of days, and I went, oh, okay. So I sort of subspaced basically a little bit, you know, I kind of went into like dreamy land, you know, and I went, okay, I can kind of see that now. I can see that now, at least as why people might be into that, you know. And I think it's always good to be able to understand the other side of things, even if you're not going to go there that often.
I love that you're saying that because, you know, as I had mentioned earlier, when I first started working as a Dom, I liked being in control. Like I was like, yeah, I'm the boss. Do what I say, you know, like, which is an extreme, like a very extreme, you know, position to fill. But I didn't become a dominatrix by accident. I can tell you that much. You know, I probably didn't have.
Does it spill into your life? Are you a bit of a fascist for the rest of your life?
A lot of sense of safety and control as a kid growing up. So to have an opportunity to assume that position was super appealing to me. And it wasn't until, like I said, I was doing this deep interpersonal work that I started to get more curious around the surrender aspect of play. And now in my personal life, I probably identify more as a switch. So somebody that, depending on the mood, depending on the person, would be willing to explore each role, whether it's submissive or dominant. And man, you can learn a lot from both sides. You know what I mean? So
you're still more dominant, though, aren't you? You're still more dominant. You're still more dominant. You're still more dominant. You're like 70-30, right? Like, come on. I can feel it.
Probably I feel myself changing a bit more and more. But yeah, you're right. But the moments when you're in the hands of somebody that really knows what they're doing and you feel like you can let go, and you're right, it doesn't have to be sexually or kinky even. But yeah, when you have that opportunity at those moments, it can feel so good. And yeah, I seek more of that.
Does it spill out into the rest of your life, Kimi? I mean, like business partnerships, for example, you know, or like I can get a bit teachery. I'm basically a teacher. I'm a facilitator. I'm a teacher, and I can get a bit teachery when I'm on, you know, with my wife, for example. She's like, "I'm not one of your students. Stop teaching." You know?
Good for her. Good for her.
So I said good boundaries, you know. But it's like naturally what we practice spills out. So does it spill? You know, are you like in the post office, kind of demanding your parcel be tied up exactly how you like, or you know, like does it spill out other ways?
You know what I gotta say, Mark, is that the more that I've been exploring kink and doing this somatic work with it, I have to say there is a part of me that has been opening and softening in ways that hadn't before.
Mm-hmm.
I find myself, I had, you know, and I didn't realize I was doing this, but I was sort of had an aversion to curiosity. I think I had a very strict way of like, a rigid way, let's say, of how things were supposed to look or play out, etc. And when I started to sort of loosen up and soften a bit more, and I wasn't that sort of like tightly wound being, I started to see like, oh, maybe the universe has something bigger and better in mind for me. And being able to not pour all my energy in forcing things to happen the way that I think that they're supposed to happen, and being able to breathe into it and soften and be like, I trust that this is working out the way it's supposed to. I'm going to keep showing up in my heart. I'm going to keep staying curious. I've noticed that has created a lot more flow in my life and has brought me a lot better things than when I had that sort of rigidity. You know what I mean? That's
Mm-hmm.
what I think about when somebody's like just deep in their control, is that sort of rigidity.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
as they say in Eastern philosophy, like be like water, like that's kind of what I think about when I think about releasing the rigidity, getting curious, and allowing myself to experience not only my power but to surrender as well. And people have a weird, connotation to the word surrender. I'm not saying that it's by choice. You're not surrendering by force. You're surrendering by your
Yeah,
own.
there's a difference, isn't there, between consent and consenting to give up control, as
Mhm,
opposed to being forced to. And
mhm,
it strikes me that there's types. So there are definitely different types sexually, the more yin or more yang, dominant, submissive, but we could also talk about the more genital, the more spiritual, there's whole maps of this that some people have, aren't there? But then we also have relational. So as you say, it depends who you're with, right? Like I can totally surrender to a really good trainer and be a massively yin student when they're amazing, when they're very, very competent. I just go, oh, I love this teacher, right?
yeah,
Whereas if I'm in a yoga class and the teacher's fucking barely qualified, I just want to take control of the whole class. I just want to be like, step aside, you can't do this properly. I will do it if you cannot do it properly. So that's relational. And then there's a third piece, I think, is what I'd call developmental. And you talked about your own kind of journey here. I think we go through journeys. Like most of the audience are not in the part of the journey which is sex is bad, you have to do it one way or you're a bad person. And then there's another part of the journey which is like maybe like there's a specific thing you get into and you lose some of your shame, but and there's another part of the journey where maybe the vanilla stuff opens up again a little bit more. It seems to me there's a sort of journey there. How would you describe that journey as you see people mature through their sexuality over 10, 20, 30 years?
yeah, that's a good question. I mean, regardless of it being even about sex, just in this sort of therapeutic journey of like when people become separated from themselves somehow because they had to constrict themselves in ways so that they could feel accepted in whatever family they showed up in or whatever society they were in. There is a way that, as we develop, we want to feel safe, we want to have security, and we'll give up a lot of shit for safety and security. And so part of that journey is like almost this like hero's journey of like, how did I get separated
Mm-hmm.
from myself in order to feel safe and secure? Because I had to as a child. I was dependent, but now as an adult, that's not the case. So you're almost unraveling what 10, 20, 30 sometimes years of conditioning and a perspective that that you have to show up a certain way. So when you start to release that, you start to find your way back to self again. And that's like a hero's journey in and of itself, because you have to sort of bring all parts of yourself in. It takes courage to sort
Yeah.
of fix your demons, to look at parts of yourself that may be in shadows, and to shed some light on like, okay, why am I the way I am? And is this really what I want in my life? Because it's really
Yeah.
easy to stay complacent. But for a lot of people, like, hitting the rock bottom or just having an experience of like, I don't want to die this way is enough for people to
I don't
start.
want to die this way.
Yeah, I don't
Like
want
a,
to die like this.
like
Yeah,
a
like
don't die virgin.
maybe I know people. I have people that come to me that haven't even had sex yet, and they're in their 40s.
Yeah,
And
yeah. No, I've been around some virgins and that, and it's their right, obviously. But what are some things everyone should at least try? So So there's someone at my door. I think my wife's got it. So what should everyone at least try at least once, do you think? You know, assuming it's, you know, they've obviously still got a choice. It's not totally repulsive. If someone said to me, for example, I've never tried oral sex, I'd be like, dude, what the fuck? Give it a go, you know? Like, come on. Like, so what would be on your list of like, you really should try these before you die?
Oh, I love this question so much. I mean, what should you try? I feel like starting with your own body and I think you're gonna think I'm being lame, but I think that people should really put more emphasis on their self-pleasure. I think
No, I've heard this from Jessica Graham, who was my sex coach for a while. She was all about that. That's her big thing. You should learn that. Yeah.
yeah, like I think men too, like, you know, I know that for a lot of men, it's just sort of like a way to release, you know, a bit out of the pipes and whatnot.
Yeah, some sort of stress relief. By the way, if you're watching the podcast, you just missed a great visual. So make sure you go to the YouTube channel so you can see that, and you can also see Kimi and I dressed in matching rubber outfits today. So I'm trying to tease the podcast listeners onto the YouTube channel. So excuse me, Kimi, for the blatant lie. So masturbation, not just as a sort of temporary stress relief, but also maybe something a bit more to it than that.
Yeah, so like, I mean, if you were just to start anywhere, like, yeah, that idea of bringing self-pleasure to a whole new level, that you just incorporate a lot of thought and intention and care to yourself, because we don't do that. Like, we don't even start with ourselves. There's so much emphasis on the other, right? Like, we focus on our partner.
Start at home, start with your own body, right? Don't know your own body, it's going to be difficult to get to know anyone else's. Let's get fucked. Kimi, that's great. I totally agree with you, but let's get fucked up. Let's get fucked up. Come on.
Play with your butthole while you're, like, I mean, just
play with your butthole. Okay. Play with your butthole. Anal play. Okay, it's good.
You know, like, play with yourself, explore that body, like, you know, the various forms of intensity that you can put on your erogenous zones, like ladies, you know, squeezing the nipples, men squeezing the nipples. Play around with yourself. See sort of what your knobs and buttons do for you. Yeah. Bringing that shit to another person, because so many of us want the other person to figure us out, because we don't even know. We're like, we figure it out.
Ladies out there, take some responsibility.
True.
Guys, you know, I'll speak for all the heterosexual men in the world right now. I've been elected. I'm a leader. Okay, we want to help. We want to serve. We want to make you have a good time. You need to fucking tell us, because you ladies are all different. Okay, you're different. You're real different. Okay, so you don't give us a guide. We're playing pool in the dark. It's just me speaking on behalf of all the men in the world, begging all the ladies in the world to tell us what you do.
Ladies, I'm back you up there, Mark. You know, it's we got to start learning to ask for what we want and start being vulnerable. That's hard. It's scary for people to ask for what they want because they're afraid they're going to get rejected or judged or something, and it's scary. But yeah, if a man can say like, "Hey, I want to get you off. Like, I want to share this experience with you, and you can trust me that if it's something I don't feel like I can accommodate right now, like, I will let you know." Doesn't mean it's a final no, but it may not be right in this moment. You know, if people can have these conversations of, you know, just being a bit more vulnerable. So you can say like, this idea of consent is not just like, that I'm not going to override your boundaries, but it's also a trust that I'm going to let you know if something's wrong or if something's not right here, instead of just staying silent. Or I'm going to let you know if I want more of this, or if I would like you to start moving your head down south, sir, you know, like whatever those things are, I'm going to let you know. So you're not just like kind of stumbling around and just hoping for the best. Like, I think it's great to have.
Can you say that last thing in a Southern accent, in a Texan accent? Is that possible? That you kind of went all Texan from it there.
You like Southern accents, Mark.
Ah!
You my.
I'm not paying for this interview, so I feel like I should maybe it's not right.
You'll get my bill in the mail, don't worry.
Kimi, I think it's only fair. Okay, so what would you like to clear up around sex? Is there some sort of message, like, you know, you want everyone to some people are misunderstanding something and you want to clear it up? What would you say is the main thing you want to clear up?
You know what comes to mind? I mean, I'm just kind of feeling into myself, and what comes to mind is just like giving it more reverence and importance than it has been for a very long time. You know, this sort of idea of like thinking of your sex as a gift. as like something that actually has meaning. And yeah, hey, I'm all about like the quickies and, you know, like the little flings and roll in the hay, but I also like have a real reverence for myself and my gifts and what I bring when I have a partner in that dynamic. And I think that if people had more sort of reverence for themselves and to see it more as a gift, you know, I think this world would be a better place, to be honest, if we all sort of saw ourselves that way and our partners that way. Um, that's not an entitlement. It's not like something to take lightly, that it is actually something that's special and meaningful and can open people up to a lot of different things. I think that would be a great sort of message for people to learn. And we're not taught that. We're taught it's a sin. We're taught it's this. We're taught it's that. But we're not really taught that it's a gift and it's a portal to the ultimate kind of pleasure that, you know, that we've been given as humans. I mean, how great are orgasms? Honestly, Mark, how great are they? They're pretty awesome.
It's going to be in my top 5 things ever. Yeah.
Yeah, man. So like, being connected to that pleasure in a really full way and having that pleasure that people struggle with pleasure in general. I think people don't really understand that their bodies are capable of so much more. If they would just sort of love it a bit more, they'd be able to experience more of that pleasure that's available to them.
Beautiful. Feels like we're starting to come to a natural close here. We still have a little time. Is there anything that you want to talk about that you haven't talked about? Something in kind of an aspect of your work, just to kind of round this off fully?
I mean, God, I love what I do. I get to help people explore a part of themselves that doesn't get a lot of attention. And I do it in a way that, you know, I feel like I'm just trying to guide them to their truth. And the work that I'm doing, incorporating aspects of therapy with kink, it's sort of revolutionary. It's quite controversial. There's ideas around like, you know, ethically what's okay, what isn't okay, you know, and it's very, very new. It's actually been bigger in Europe than it has been in the States, and I want to change that, you know. I want to bring it in the States.
What would you call it? Kink therapy, or like what would be the term for that?
The term conscious kink is actually
conscious kink
in Europe for a long time. And, you know, of course, Europe's ahead of the game over this.
Where in Europe? I mean, you're talking about rural Spain or Berlin? Do you know what I mean? It's just, it's very different in different towns, right? I think you got.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, I know like there's a lot of conscious kink festivals in Amsterdam and in Germany, etc. But I want to sort of let people know that there's a place for you to go, for you to sort of dive into this work a bit deeper. And I know that there's longing there for a lot of people to be seen in this way, but not feeling like they have therapists that can hold it. A lot of therapists have trouble with their own sexualities, and you know, they don't know how to hold this with their clients. So that's why a lot of my clients don't tell their therapists about this aspects of themselves.
It's tricky. It's just not necessarily something they're going to be able to handle or talk about, and you know, that can be the case with embodied experiences or psychedelic experiences too. But yeah, for sure.
And I want to say, you know, it's better that we're having these conversations than not having these conversations, because we haven't been having conversations like this for far too fucking long. So we need to talk about it. We need to get uncomfortable. We need to like be controversial, because people are needing this more than ever. And I think it's important work.
Dominatrixes, they just want to make everyone feel uncomfortable, you know?
Right now.
I like it. Okay, that's how we're going to end the interview, okay? At the end, I want you to say, this interview is over! Okay, before we do, though, Kimi, where can people find out more about you? Where should they go on the interweb to find your stuff? I've got a couple of websites here in front of me.
Yeah. So I have I'm doing some rebranding right now, but where people can find me right now is www.domidolls.com. It's DOMIDOLLZ. You could also find a lot of my video tutorials and things on YouTube, and that's just youtube.com/domidolls. Again, DOMIDOLLZ. And then my therapy practice you can find at inchbyinchhealing.com. So
inch by inch healing. Inch by inch. There's more than one inch. Oh my God. That would hurt a girl. Okay, inchbyinchhealing.com. Got it. Okay, yeah, look at that. There's the therapy you looking all kind of like, hey, I'm respectable, but Oh, not entirely. There's a couple of extra buttons undone there on that picture, isn't there? Okay, that's great. That's tasteful. It's tasteful, Kimmy. Tasteful. I like what we did there. Okay, so good. And a closing message about the body. Do you have a closing message about the body for all our listeners?
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, you know, I may be a dom, but I'm a lover at heart. Love yourself, love your body, be good to yourself, be gentle with yourself, and you're not alone. If you think you're kinky, trust me, you know, I've heard it all. There's so many of us out there. So just know you're not alone and take care of yourself.
Kink Army on the morgue. Okay, so I feel like non-violent communication as well. Check it out. We didn't even talk about that. Okay. So I would like you to end this interview by demanding that it ends in the most dominatrix fashion. If you're comfortable with that, of course, Kimmy. Ready?
Go. Now, you can tell me you're grateful for my time, Mark. I know you are. You don't have to say a word. You're welcome. And I imagine you kissing the top of my foot with your attitude. And that's a good boy. Now, scurry along and have a lovely day.
So gentle, Kimmy, mistress. Thank you. Okay, lovely, lovely, lovely. Really appreciate your time, Kimmy.
Yeah, thank you, Mark, so much.